I've heard that guides are all just myself at different levels of consciousness. Is this true? Are guides just higher levels of myself? So, good question. I know this stuff gets all confusing, right? We hear so many different things. So, your guide... Well, there's two different things here. So yeah, let me say both of them because they might sound like they're in contradiction, but they're not. So the first thing is, on a certain level, your guides are yourself, the same way everybody you know is yourself. So yes, we are one singular consciousness. So yes, we are one, we are the same. On that level where we are the same, there's a sense of only one being. The same way you feel me as yourself, on that level of consciousness, at that level of consciousness, when you say me, me is everything, but it's experienced as me, right? That level of I am is everything, and everything manifests out of that. So, so from that perspective, your guides, everything you've ever seen or will see, is one and the same. In my experience of the differentiation from oneness in through all the layers of existence, that there are different dimensions, and again, in my experience, there's a differentiation that continues to multiply itself. So you have a tree, the trunk. So you've got one trunk. One trunk then makes 8 limbs. And then the 8 limbs each make 25 branches. And then each of those 25 branches make however many twigs. So the same way that I am on the inside one singular consciousness then manifests from itself as a trunk to different aspects, which then keep opening. So the easiest way for you to relate to that in a human sense, going from the other direction, if we go from the twigs to the branch, that you're experiencing yourself as one twig of a person, and if you open up to the branch or the limb, then you experience yourself as the soul that had lots of lives. And at each of those levels, you experience yourself as one single me, the me of this person, or the me of the soul, the me that was the nun and the pirate and the little old lady and the boy and the this and that, right? As the soul, that's all me. There's one me as that soul with all that. And then having the aperture focus in more, it was just the one me of Kristin. No, it's just one me, it's just Kristin. Right? And then surrendering back through into the me of the soul. Oh, one me, which was Kristin and so and so and so and so and so and so, on and on. And then surrendering back further to the God self. Oh, one me, creating a world, universe, to project myself into as a soul and as human beings for lifetimes. One me, right? So the aperture shifts. Depending on where you're resting, which aperture you're resting at. If you're resting in the aperture of the personal, for me, Kristin me, one can rest in the aperture of Kristin me and then have the experience of hearing from or having a guide or experiencing your God self. So I'm going to do a little body enactment here, right, to try and help get this across, right? So if I'm in the Kristin me here, right, the small me, and then the God self me is back here, if I'm resting in the aperture of Kristin, I can experience myself as almost separate from my God self, even though it's the same I am. Right? It's the same way you can experience yourself separate from your neighbor. It's the same I am, but it's a different expression of it. So it is possible to have yourself in your trajectory of the twig and the branch and the limb and the tree, to, from your twig perspective, to go into meditation and experience your branch or your tree trunk as your guide. It also might be that you're accessing another being that will go back to the same absolute source point as one, but that it's a different resonance, it's a different frequency. And we have I'm going to introduce another concept. I hope I'm not overloading here, which is like this blueprint resonance. From my personality to my soul level, or the blueprint of Kristin, when you deeply listen to that, I need to listen. I need to listen for a second. Hold on, there's more information. All right, so there's multiple levels of these blueprints, but it's important to talk about because it's going to help you discern both in communicating and help you recognize the truth of your own being, right? And I'm interested in both, so I'm going to be a little more thorough with this. When you see someone walking down the street from behind, you can't really actually see them, but you know who it is, right? It's like you're recognizing that blueprint. Let me be quiet for a minute. So I'm going to stick to the there's more detail to this, but I think for the sake of what I'm trying to get across, I'm going to stick to just a couple levels here. So I'm going to stick to the humanness and soul level, and most likely what you're going to be feeling with your guides. So there's a different resonance, a different blueprint. If you are communicating, if you're in your meditation and your aperture is resting at your twig human self, I'll just use these for clarification, right? If you're resting as that and you're communicating with a branch aspect of yourself or a tree trunk aspect of yourself, the blueprint will be the same. You will recognize, oh, that is me speaking. It's tricky because this stuff ultimately all breaks down. It all breaks down because we're the same singular truth. So it's only relevant really in these layers of manifestation. So when I'm looking at my personality self, Kristin, and the lifetimes that have been remembered, the soul blueprint is the same, which is why I recognize the difference between my past lives and other people's past lives. or if I'm seeing other people's past lives. So when I was doing sessions in my office back in Massachusetts, and I was doing one-on-one sessions, hands-on with people and working really specifically with one particular storyline, I would see these images that would open of an emotional something that happened in this lifetime, and then another image would open up behind it of a previous lifetime with all these different characters, different time, different temperature, different clothes, different people, but I could recognize from the past life that the person who was the brother in that past life was the person's, sister, mother, lover, whatever, in the current lifetime, because I was recognizing that blueprint of themselves throughout lifetimes. So you can recognize if it's your own blueprint or not. And again, I'm saying it does break down the further back you go into truth, because the differentiation becomes less. Like white light becomes rainbows, and then you've got 10,000 shades of purple, 10,000 shades of yellow, 10,000 shades of red, right? And if you're looking at all the distinctions or the blueprints, sure, you can notice the blueprint between the colors of the reds and the difference between the blueprint of the red and the purple or the blue. And then the further you come back, well, it's all white light. So yeah, you're not going to see the differentiation from that white light. You're going to see it through the manifesting. But this is exactly how we're made. This is exactly what we are. So when I'm talking about the tree and the limbs and the branches and the twigs of your own trajectory of being oneness in everything, right? You get to be the individual twig, the way there's a coconut tree and a another papaya tree, right? They get to have their individuation. There gets to be those infinite varieties of shades of red. But when you track everything back through, you're going to come back through the rainbow, at least metaphorically, and then come back to white, where we're one. So in terms of understanding yourself, if you can start to recognize yourself as frequency and your blueprint, right? The blueprint is a resonance. It's a resonance frequency. And you can, and that's just part of what manifestation, that's how manifestation happens. We're sound happening. We're, this singing universe. So when you're communicating with guides, this is another aspect of communication, that I'm also reaching out for a particular blueprint or resonance. So the same way you might recognize a friend when you can't actually really see them, but you recognize, oh yeah, that's so-and-so, even though you're aware your eyes just did not have any capacity to actually make out the distinction of them, right? There's an inner recognition, oh, I know who that is. It's that same thing that happens on the inside with guides, is that you're starting to recognize resonance and frequency. And I'm going to use this tree example again. So just this analogy. So let's use the trunk as oneness or white light, where there's not going to be a differentiation. And then the limbs coming out, and then branches coming out from there, and the twigs. And let's say you're on one twig that has comes from a particular limb, right? Twig, branch, limb, and your guide is a different twig, branch, limb, that your resonances are going to feel different at all those levels of being. Your resonance is going to feel different as twigs, different as branches, different as limbs, but then will feel like the same resonance as the trunk, because you've moved into white light or where there's no differentiation. So in terms of this question of is it yourself? Well, it all depends on what level you're speaking about. But having me explain it in this way will also help you understand how this whole thing is working.